It was only a week ago that I escaped from a vampire's manor. Feru, I think he called himself. He had a device that generated a storm and used it to lure me into his home. I remember seeing it, creating the storm in the distance as I was running away. That place, that event, must have really shaken me up, because I can't stop having nightmares about it. Just last night, I closed my eyes for what felt like a second, and there I was, standing in the mezzanine of that gothic foyer. But Feru wasn't there. I was completely alone, just staring at the oil paintings and having them stare back at me. It was hard to see through the tall, stained glass windows, but I could tell it was raining outside. There was a knock on the thick, carved oak front door. I stood on my toes, expecting Feru to show up at any moment to answer. I knew it was a dream, or at least I thought it was, but I couldn't move. I was only an observer. The knock came again, followed by a lightning strike, and the door clicked open. A woman walked in. She was about my age, late 20s, early 30s. She had a brown ponytail and a long raincoat on. She looked terrified, afraid to even be in there. "Hello?" she called into the torchlit foyer, her voice echoing off the walls. I watched her scan the mezzanine. Her eyes looked right through me. She didn't see me. She made her way further into the room, toward the statue in its center, and then turned to move up the stairs. Dread was building in my chest. I knew it was only a matter of time until Feru appeared. And even then, it felt like something even more terrible than the vampire was lurking in this manor. When the young woman reached the top of the stairs, she removed her long raincoat to reveal a red sweater. She slipped it over the banister. "Hello?" she called again across the mezzanine, then craned her neck to look down the short hallway into the gothic kitchen. An odd darkness was coalescing at the bottom of the stairs. The woman, completely unaware of it, proceeded into the hall to the kitchen and out of the foyer, but I was still trapped there, watching the strange darkness climb the stairs after her, slowly, as though it didn't want to be seen. I awoke from my nightmare and sleep paralysis. I felt completely floored, exhausted, like I'd been hit by a truck. I was hot, dripping sweat under my sheets. The paralysis broke, and I flung them off of me. I stumbled out of bed. I needed water. Something was wrong with me. Something was wrong with my inner ear. My balance was off. Clumsily, I made my way to my bathroom. I looked horrible in the mirror. Gaunt, sickly pale, skin with even the slightest hint of green, and what the heck is that? I took a closer look at my neck. There were 2 bite marks plunged into it. I slapped my face, wondering if this was also part of a dream. Nope, I was awake. When did those bite marks get there? I wondered. I escaped. He never got me. A smooth trickle of blood drained out of the puncture wounds. How fresh was this bite? Dawn broke to a beautiful day, and I found myself hunched over my computer, scouring the internet for any information I could find on vampire bites. There were a wide array of claims, things ranging from becoming a vampire yourself, all the way to just having a mild sickness that goes away after a few days. I could certainly attest to the sickness, but all the same, this didn't sit right. How had I been bitten? I had the locks on all my doors changed. Rush order. I checked my windows for signs of a forced entry. Nothing. Then again, the last time I saw Feru appear before me, it was in a cloud of spiders. When dealing with the supernatural, it was hard to know what preventative measures to take. Another night came, and I woefully climbed into bed. I felt exhausted, a mild fever still running. I drank a big glass of water, took some cold medicine, and fell fast asleep. My nightmare picked up right where the last left off. The woman in the red sweater was sitting in that gothic kitchen, eating the same venison that I was served. But again, no one was around. Feru had made me mine. Had she cooked it herself? Who was this strange woman, and what was she doing in the home of a vampire? Was she lured in just as I had been, trying to seek shelter from the storm? The shadow caught my eye again in the loft over the kitchen. It looked considerably more humanoid than in the last nightmare, and still, the woman seemed blissfully unaware of its presence. It was making its way down the stairs, approaching her from behind. My heart was pounding, and my adrenaline was through the roof. I woke up again just before it reached her, and again I found myself in sleep paralysis. I felt completely helpless and ill beyond belief, so weak, like I was about to die at any second. All my covers were off. I must have kicked them off in my sleep. I was able to crane my neck down to look at my body. There were visible bumps moving under my skin. Must have been 20 or 30 of them. I could feel my neck bulging as they went past. I could see them moving over my chest and down the veins of my arms. They remained after my paralysis broke. They were not a hallucination. I barely made it to the bathroom. I was shaking so bad. I scrambled to get the drawer open and reached for a pair of surgical scissors. I tried running them under some scalding hot water for a moment, just to sterilize them as best as I could. I looked down at my body again to see one of those bumps moving down my leg just over my thigh. I sat down on top of the toilet seat, flicked the scissors open, and began cutting my leg. There was something wrong with my blood as it squelched out. It had turned pale, almost completely white, and it had curdled. It looked like cottage cheese. There were lumps. I was disgusted and horrified, but I hadn't yet isolated what that bump was. It was avoiding the wound that I cut into the path before it. It was trying to crawl back up my thigh, but I wouldn't let it. I pinched the bump where it sat under my skin. I could feel another one of those bumps moving along the inside of my forehead, getting near to my eye. I had to move quickly. It hurt like hell, but I pushed the bump in my thigh all the way over to the wound. Legs appeared at first, and then a white spider crawled out of me. Its body was about the size of a thumbnail, and each of its legs was about an inch long. It was wet, textureless, smooth and shiny. It didn't have eyes or fangs, and its legs were so limp, like they had no structure. I screamed and threw it at the far wall. It splatted into it, dying instantly. It wasn't protected by an outer shell like most bugs. That bump that was on my forehead was now approaching my eyelid. I could not stop screaming. I threw on clothes as fast as I could and jumped in my car to go to the hospital. I couldn't believe this was happening. How could an illness like this even exist? I didn't bother to park my car properly when I arrived. Just ran into triage where luckily there wasn't much of a line. I was panicking as I explained the problem to the nurse. She seemed so unfazed. I wondered if I was making any sense. "All right, take a seat," she told me. And there I was in the waiting room, still with those spiders everywhere, forcing their way uncomfortably under my leg skin as I sat in the chair. Some of the blood on my leg had dried, and I could better make out what those lumps were. They were cracking, becoming something else. I looked up and around the waiting room to see if anyone else was seeing this. The clumps of curdled blood cracked open. They had been spider eggs, and the new hatchlings were already trying to bury themselves back into my wound. I couldn't help but scream in the waiting room as I desperately tried to brush them off me. I was shushed by 3 people. Are they insane? Are they not seeing what's happening to me? But as I looked around, I noticed something. A long brown ponytail and a red sweater. It was the woman from my dream. Was she a nurse? No, she wasn't in scrubs. She was walking behind the swinging doors into the next area. I got up and stood beside them. You needed a passcode to enter, and when the next bed was wheeled in, I snuck in. I lost that woman at first, but then I saw her turning down another hallway in the distance. I walked at a brisk pace, determined to get to the bottom of this. I rounded the corner quickly, but carefully, not wanting to bump into anyone coming at a brisk pace in the other direction. The hallway led nowhere, to a void, and standing in it was the vampire. Pharaoh's grin was wide as when his mouth split apart. Suddenly, I was in that basement with the hanging sheep, swinging from the rafters. he darted behind them, shrieking with glee. I turned to flee. At least I knew the way out. I awoke in sleep paralysis, staring down at my own naked body, breathing hard. Spiders were pushing their way out of my skin and into the night air. A small army of them, glowing white in the moonlight as they crawled towards my feet. They were forming something at the foot of my bed, and that something became Feru. My eyes were paralyzed. I couldn't look at his face, but he was dressed in all the regalia of an elder vampire. He lifted a bony, ringed finger to point at me. My heart was pounding harder than I thought possible. Did you really think you were safe just because you escaped my manor? He asked me. I couldn't have responded even if I had something to say. Matthew, you are my thrall, and I'll see you soon. Feru burst into the white spiders and scattered himself throughout my room, disappearing completely. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. I wanted to take a little bit of time to tell you about my book that I just self-published on Amazon. It's a dark fantasy adventure novel, and it takes place in a universe where there's 2 hells and no heaven. The main character is a little boy who at the end of the first chapter gets shot in the head, and then throughout the rest of the book grows up in hell. Although it isn't horror, it has many horrific elements and demons, and I have to say it's quite violent. I'm really proud of it. I think it's a really epic adventure story, and I think people will really enjoy it.